Welcome to another session of Java. In this class, we are going to discuss more about inheritance, storing data into file using binary files. We are also going to discuss a little bit of interfaces. Now here is a program that looks similar to what we have done in the past class. So you have here a class called staff. If you remember the structure you are working on, that was called employee. This is almost similar, some of the attributes may look different, but this one has been created a while back, so you have a little bit different architecture. However, this class suits the purpose. It shows what I'm trying to show here, so I'm going to use this project here to show you the examples that I'm trying to discuss. You have the staff class with basic attributes of staff number, staff name, the date the staff joined the company. You have another attribute called its basic salary. So all these are variables that belong to all the staff. What type of staff doesn't matter, anyone has this information. Plus you have created this staff as a abstract class, and abstract class means the data in this class can be belong to subclasses only. You cannot create an object using staff class. That is what abstract means. Objects are too general to be staff. It must be specific. Also another behavior you remember, any abstract class may or may not have abstract function. Let's see. Yeah, we have abstract function. Calculate total salary or get paid. If you remember the example we did, it's called get paid. Or in this case, it's called calculate total salary because we are forcing the child classes to implement this function. And we have all the getters and setters. We have the constructor, important for the class. Then we have classes such as permanent staff that extends the staff class. Something that I have skipped just now is this thing here, which is called implements serializable. Even permanent staff has it. All the classes have them. So I'll talk about it after I discuss this information, the basic details. Again, we have another class called abstract permanent class, which is also abstract, and it also has getters and setters. And I don't have the toString method here, unfortunately. In this case, if there was toString method, yes, it would have been better to implement, and then you could have seen the details, right? Okay, but anyway, you get the idea. You can add them if you like. So you have the permanent staff here, and it extends the staff. And implement serializable is added to all the classes. You see here, you have a permanent staff class. Then you have your managers, for example, which is also a permanent staff. So this class extends permanent staff. Thereby, it is not abstract, but it extends permanent staff, which means it extends staff also. And you can see here all these calls to the superclasses. Even in the permanent staff, you have this call to the superclass because constructor chaining happens in the superclass. And then this constructor chaining is important because you can't create a manager without having to create a permanent staff. You can't create a permanent staff unless you create a staff class. So thereby you create a staff, specialize it to make a permanent staff, specialize it to make a manager. That's how this constructor chaining will work. This is of course the default constructor. This is the permanent. This is the overloader constructor. In the overloader constructor, you have these specific details applied only to the managers, which are phone plan amounts and bonus payments, for example. These attributes only apply to a manager. That's why you have these attributes in the manager class. And you have all the getters and setters as usual. Now you have a toString method here. So in this toString method, you are printing information about the manager. But of course, you can see here staff name and staff data. You are getting them from the superclass. If you wanted, you could have created a toString method in the permanent class staff and to staff the staff class, and you could have called super toString. Or you can just retrieve the information by using a separate type of output by getters, because the getters are usable even in the subclasses because the getters belong to the same class. It's under inheritance, you own these things. You have a name, you have a salary, you have a staff name. So you can either directly call the super.toString method, or you can create getters and call them in your child class in order to print the information about the child class. So here is the details of manager. Now we have other examples. You can see here, this is a function that you have implemented because it was forced upon you, because this is a abstract class in the parent class, therefore you had to implement it. because managers' salaries are different. They have basic salary plus they have their overtime plus the health scheme amount, and also they have bonus payments. You see, bonus payment, and there's also overtime. Okay, then you have here, so these are similar to what you have done in the past class. Then you have permanent staff and project staff. So project staff is also extending staff, but this is just one class, and you have a two-string method. And is this abstract? No, it's not an abstract class, so you can create actually staff class as well. Then you have here okay, so those are the classes you have. Okay, then you have your technician is there, technician. So technician is an example of a permanent staff. In addition to manager, you have a technician, for example, who is created as a permanent staff. So these are examples. It doesn't follow the exact hierarchy you have seen in the previous class, but you get it, you get the idea, right? You have these permanent staff, and then from the permanent staff it branches out to create these technician classes. Yes, okay. So I mean, there are some tools available that can actually create for you a diagram in NetBeans. It can create for you an idea of how you can show the class dependency diagram. And let me see if we have these tools available. Plugins, no, we don't have them here in this case. Actually, yeah, okay. So you have your class technicians and your permanent staff, and then let's talk about the implements thingy. If we are talking about the implements in the project staff manager, yeah, here you can see implement serializable. So this means whatever is in this class can be written onto a file. That's what it means. This means whatever is in this class can be written into a file and retrieved. So you can write the data into a file system and you can retrieve the data. So in reality, part of this class, part of this session has been created using a graphical interface. Let me run it. You can see here it has been created using a graphical interface, and we have stopped using graphical interfaces in Java because basically if you create a graphical interface for desktop interfaces, you can create it, it may be useful, but as I have been telling you guys in the last classes, unless you really want to avoid using web interfaces, then you can go for Java. Otherwise, don't go for any interface that is desktop based, application based, because the trend is that everything is web based. Go and learn some beta framework like Laravel, for example, and you will be able to make web interfaces. There is no point of dragging and dropping all these buttons and stuff and creating layouts, and all these ideas are foolish because nowadays you don't really want to reinstall applications. You know, any changes should be live and should come directly to everyone at the same time. If you have separate applications running, you have to uninstall applications, you have to reinstall new applications, and the whole process updating is difficult and cumbersome. So the best idea is for you to actually create the framework like Laravel and create web applications. Therefore, in this class we are going to use this company, which is the main class that we have, instead of this company main interface. Instead of this, I can show you the source here. Instead of going to this, okay, so this idea that we have created in the past was used as a graphical framework when we did some classes in the past. We are not going to use this design. We are going to close this. Instead, we are going to use this company main class here and just simulate these things here. So you may not be using these things as what we are learning right now to create an employee management system, because whatever you do for employee management system nowadays, you'll probably do them on web interfaces, and you will have all these models created for you in the Laravel frameworks, for example, and you will have their controllers and you will manage them through some views. So you don't really need all these functionalities of inheritance to create a desktop framework, desktop application. However, there are cases where you might be analyzing data and then creating the data in order to put them into databases, or even you might create dashboards. You know, you might actually do a back-end analysis system that can run on your Java application. So you might actually need inheritance in those cases. Either way, I'm just trying to show you the concept. It is upon you to apply them on your real life and wherever possible. So you have this main class here, which is going to use for all these classes, and one additional class that we have in this project is called the HR policies. HR policies. So HR policies, this is something we haven't studied in the past. We are going to separately study this when we are going to cover interfaces as a separate topic. Okay, some of you may be thinking interfaces mean these kind of graphical user interfaces. No. Okay, this is also interface, but these interfaces are called GUI. These are GUI, the graphical user interfaces. We are talking about interfaces when we refer to these kind of classes. So interfaces are rather important because when you learn through interfaces, you'll remember, you'll come to realize these things. These are kind of like policies that you would like to enforce. It's almost like abstract methods. The difference is all these are abstract methods. So therefore you don't call this as an public abstract class HR policies and create all of them as abstract. Yeah, that is one way to do it. But when all the methods are abstract, we call them as interfaces and rename them into this kind of idea. So we create a class called public interface HR policies. What happens is anyone who implements these HR policies must complete all this. So if you are an employee, for example, and you implement the HR policies, you must complete a medical checkup, you must fill an ethics form, you must sign a staff contract. I'm just showing you an example of how we force policies upon classes. So the idea of interfaces is anything that is implemented as an interface must handle some functions, and that is complete medical checkup. And it looks exactly like abstract methodology and abstract behavior that we have just discussed for abstract classes. That is true because all these are abstract classes in fact. So that is the idea of interfaces, and I'll go into details of interfaces later on. But you can see right now in your manager class, for example, not manager class, technician class, yes, yeah, here is an example of the technician, for example, implements HR policies. You see, actually all other classes also implement HR policies, but we are just showing you as a concept what happens when you implement an interface. So earlier what happened was when you extend a permanent staff, and if that staff class have a abstract method, you have to implement that method like this. See, public double calculate salary. So you are having your own calculate methodology. The same way you are creating a different behavior, like you are, it's like creating multiple inheritance scenarios. You know, the most closest to this is in Laravel frameworks, for example, what you call as traits, because traits are classes you create separately where you create them and use them, and the behavior becomes available to all the class that use them as if they are their own functions. You see, it's the same architecture here. You are telling that I implement all these HR policies, therefore all the functions in the HR policies become available to you, and you will use the class name, in fact the whole class name, when you are referring to these variables. So you as an object have these classes as your own methods, exactly what we do in Laravel, for example. So for those who have some idea of what is traits in Laravel, you will understand clearly what this is. Or for those who doesn't have any understanding of Laravel, you might actually later on when learning Laravel, you can see trait becomes easy to understand when you learn these kind of architectures in Java. So in Java, these things are called interfaces because we are implementing them and we are gaining functionality. And of course they have not been implemented. I'm just trying to show you this idea because later on we'll study interfaces in more details. Part of Java 2 is studying interfaces, and of course, as I told you again, in a daily work you are not going to use them in everyday work you are doing, because most of the people probably when they are doing scripting or web frameworks, they'll be using PHP, not Java. So Java becomes applicable more when you go into the data analysis field and when you implement a lot of data analytics, or if you are doing a lot of analysis of files or strings or any type of work that involves background analysis and backend analysis. You can actually create Java based architectures. Therefore it's good to understand the framework, good to understand how it works, and also good to practice and try them. That way you have good understanding. And even now there are a lot of many applications running on Java, and once you have good understanding of Java, it will help when you are learning your own application development, especially in the field of Android application development, where Java has become the majority, become the mainstream. So although you have all those frameworks, if you really want to learn the native coding in Android, you'll be learning Java, you know, and you'll be familiar with the ideas when you learn these things here. Okay, so let's go to our concept here that we were talking about. This is the interfaces, and you are implementing those interfaces. Now in our class, there is one more item we have created, and that is called company controller. I have created this as a controller because, you know, sometimes when you are creating add, edit and delete, it's important that we use a common class to manage them. In many cases, it's better to even call them as manager controller, staff controller, you know, or project staff controller, technician controller. Why? Because add, edit and delete, all these are examples of things that people will be doing. And if you want to follow the architectures used by the web frameworks, you can decide what my controller does. And in fact, my controller can have an index method, just like what we do in Laravel. My company controller can have a separate method, and it can show you a view like what we do in Laravel. So if you students want to follow that architecture, you can actually follow that way. So you have an idea where you have your controller, and then the controller helps you with showing information to the user. But in this case, we just have one controller which manages all these classes. Okay, this is also one way. I mean, Java doesn't ask you to create separate controllers. You can decide what you want instead of limiting to the framework. So you can say you have company controller, and you are creating this company controller called add manager function inside the company controller. So similar to that, you can create add staff, add permanent staff, add technician, you know, like that. So I am showing you here an example for just managers. Okay, just managers, because I have created add manager function, and then I have here save in a manager, retrieve in a manager, you know, finding a manager, printing a manager, for example. This is an example of what I am doing for managers. So as that idea, let us try to test this idea in our main class. So one of the classes where we can implement this is in the main class, because we are going to create the data from the user. Now I don't recommend you to use the scanner here, because it will lead to a lot of input output from the user. Instead, we are going to directly give variables and create those variables ourselves. Here, for example, you have an example of a manager class, and manager is coming from the manager is coming from the manager class, which means in the manager class, if you look at the, you see here, this is the constructor. The order of variables must be followed. So when you are creating the employee manager here, for example, you are saying manager, HR manager equal new manager, and these things follow the order. I have pasted here the constructor outline so that you remember the order of the things. So you have, for example, staff form payment, bonus payment, overtime hours allowed, then you have overtime rate, you know, health scheme, then you have staff name and all these dishes. So we have here information about one staff, for example, okay, called Shiraz. Yes. And then you have here an example. One of the business rules: managers don't have overtime. Okay, so if they don't have overtime, then you will not put anything for the overtime. So that means enforcing the company rules using exceptions. So set overtime loss alert. Okay, this is custom exception which we have not done yet. So I'm going to remove this part here, because we are not handling any exception handling in this case. Instead, we are just going to follow this idea of using this class for creating the managers. Okay, so you have here this manager. Now in your company controller, look at this thing here. This is a list of all the managers. Okay, list of all the managers. What is this? This is an array list. It is actually like a database. So we are trying to save the data to the file system. Therefore, we are trying to save this information to a array list first. Okay, so in the add manager function, once you send this information, you see, once you send this information about the staff name, staff ID and these things, it is going to create a new manager. You see, create a new manager by creating a manager class, by following those data in the order of the data. So we are using the company controller to create this data. And one thing that you can easily understand by looking at these classes is that you have here your company controller, which is created as a class. But look at these functions, they are called static. They are static. Why? In Java you make them static because you want to make sure that these methods are available to anyone who wants to use them, instead of creating an instance of it. So the company controller is the controller. You don't need to create an object in order to access these methods, because they are just, API. You are accessing this method, sending information. The purpose of this method is to send the data to the file system. Okay, so we have this add manager function here. In the add manager function, you are getting all these inputs from the user. So therefore, let us follow this idea also and go to our company here in this class. You have your manager here. All this information about the manager is given to you, but we have sent the data to the manager class. So let's try to see the order again. I'll paste them here because it's easier to follow the order if you have a reference to the function. So let me just paste that function here. We have to send the staff number, staff basic salary, staff join date, you see, in the order that is asked. So they are already here too. So we can send them by calling the class name. Okay, keep the manager class here. Company controller dot add manager. You see, add manager. So what is the staff name? Staff name is Shiraz. Is the staff name. What is staff number? You have this as a staff number 1987. Then you have, for example, joined date, not joined date, your basic salary. Okay, this is going a little bit too far. Okay, so staff name, staff number, basic salary. Let's give a basic salary of 13,400, for example. It has given by default 0 because it doesn't want to create any problems. Join date is also a string in this case, so we have this idea here. So let's put this here as join date. And then what is remaining is overtime hours allowed, and overtime hours is, in this case, is, you can see here, according to this constructor. By looking at this constructor, you know the order is staff phone plan amount, which appears. Then you have staff bonus amount. Okay, you can always, let us just not refer to this, right? We can easily refer ourselves. 13,500. And then join date, overtime hours allowed. Let's also forget about the rules for now. Overtime hours allowed, let's say 24 hours allowed per week for manager. And then overtime rate, they are paid 50, 60, 55 rupiah per hour for every overtime. Health scheme amount, let's give 1,200 rupiah for health scheme, so that they can go to the doctor and remove some of their teeth, maybe 1,200. And then health scheme amount, that is health scheme amount. Then you have phone plan, also let's give them 1,200 so they can have good 10 GB of data. Then you have bonus payment, because they are managers, they have to be given bonus, and bonus is usually a little bit high, so let's give them 5,000. So you can see here, these are the information you are sending to the staff class. So these are just added here for reference. In reality, you don't need these things. I'm just adding them to the comments so that we can always follow and give the data in the order. So all you need to create one manager is this, rather. You see, company controller dot add manager Shiraz, and give this information. So it goes into our company controller. We don't know what's happening in the background. We just use our company controller in the main class. In the main class, we just call them manager class, and then that class goes into add manager function. It goes directly into the add manager function. It creates this manager data. You see, what does it do? First, it retrieves the manager list. Why? Because we want to make sure that we have an updated manager list, and that is this manager list, because you have to retrieve from the database the manager list. Manager list is inside a list, so you want to make sure before you add into the list the list is updated. Okay, this is because we are using file system. If we are using a database, it's easier, we can just send the data to the database. Now later on we will study that, but this is file system. So when you are applying to the file system, what happens is it will overwrite the file. So instead of overwriting, first we read the data, we add the new manager, and we save it back to the file system. Okay, that way you will make sure that the last manager that you are adding is actually added to the end of the previous list. That is what's happening here. Let's go to the retrieve manager list. So retrieve manager list is going to the file system. It is actually going to the local file system. Let's see the file project. For example, here we have company, we have company class inside here, manager list.data. Okay, actually that file, maybe we will delete it for now because this is a new project, we don't want to have previous data. Okay, so if this file exists, you see, if this file exists, then it will go to the file system, it will try to read the data there, and then it will update the file to say array list manager list equal to binary data.read object. Okay, so this is a little bit new to you, maybe you will want to go this slowly. You have a file here. This means there's a file called manager list.dat on our root folder. In this case it doesn't exist. Why? Because there is no managers. When you are retrieving, the managers list will exist. Okay, that means if that file exists. Now after you check the file and create a file variable, you will send that file variable into what is known as a stream, because you are trying to read now. So this data goes into a stream, and then this stream gets passed into what is known as an object input stream. The reason is because we are not trying to write text information. You see, we are trying to write an array list as it is. We are trying to read an array list, one whole list from the file system. It's kind of easy, but the setup is a little bit complicated. So we are not really writing the data to a file system using text. We are using what is known as a binary file. So we are saving the data into the binary file. Using this, we are retrieving the data from the binary file using this function called read object. Okay, so what we are saying is this binary data is there in this file. That's what we are trying to say here. So therefore, go to the file system and read the whole list as it is and cast it. Cast means convert it, because you might actually be reading the wrong data. So we want to make this on the safe side, you know. So take the data from the file system, convert it into a array list of managers, and put it inside our temporary variable called array list managers, and then assign it into our manager list, which is up here as a static variable. See, it is static. That means wherever you modify it, it will have the latest data. So if you retrieve the file and put it inside the manager, you don't need a return statement, because you are directly modifying something that is already static. That is why you are not returning it in this case. So in Java, that's a little bit easier to do. And this try catch block exists here because you are trying to work with file system, and the compiler will force you to handle any exceptions. Otherwise you will not be able to write this code. The idea is this file must exist. If this file doesn't exist, how are you going to read it, right? So that is why you need this error handling here. Okay, so what you are trying to do here is you are actually trying to retrieve the file system from the file manager, and then add into the data and save in back. Let's see what happens in the saving back. So in the saving back, what happens is you are going to write. You see, this time you are going to write. Instead of read object, the same binary data has a method called write object, and that write object is you are going to add the data to the file system, and that way it will create a manager list and save this data into the file system. Okay, now if you want to, that is what you are doing with saving the data to the user, to the file. So let us try to run this program, and then okay, sorry, it's going to run the graphical interface. Let me try to run this file separately. Here our company, we are going to run our company controller, run the file. Okay, and then it has created this manager.dat file. Okay, it cannot find the specified file. That error is coming from company controller, because there is no data yet. You see, we are showing this error to the output. However, this manager will be created and now it will be saved. See here, you have this manager. If you try to open this file from Notepad file, you can see here there is some binary data, and this binary data is there because this data is coming from a manager class, and all these important details about the manager is written and you can read them. So that is the idea of this tutorial, to show you how you can save the data using a function called save manager, for example, and also retrieve the data to the array list by using retrieve manager list. And then that is how you are going to save the data. Okay, editing and finding data through the existing data, this is something we will do after we go through and implement the idea of saving and retrieving the data from the file system. So what I want you to do is, I want you to try to go through this video like the way we always do. After you watch the video, you have to create yourself another case here, like add manager. You have to create another example for add technician. Okay, and make sure you follow the same example as add manager by creating a technician here and sending it to the add technician function, and create that add technician function in the company controller here in the add manager function. Okay, here in the add manager function you create another function called add technician, and also you have to make sure you create another array list for technician list, and make sure when you run the program it creates this file called technicianlist.dat file in your project file. So once you are able to do that, then we will continue this class to implement other functionalities that we want by going through the array list and file system. Okay, good luck. So please try to do that and then we will continue the class.